3 centuries after his death, Aurangzeb is still cursed every day on the streets of India. Not because he is alive, but because he is never dead in the mind. But here is the strange thing. If he was so bad, why do people erect statues of his enemies whenever they need to incite anger? Is it hatred that keeps him immortal? Aurangzeb was more than just a Muslim emperor. He was the son of Shah Jahan, the builder of the legendary Taj Mahal. But while his father is remembered for his greatness and romance, Aurangzeb is remembered as the murderer of his father, the murderer of his brother, and the murderer of the belief that an empire could be pluralistic. That is how history is told. But pause for a moment. Are parricides simply the product of radical Islam? Or are they the product of the same power games that all monarchs play? It is said that Aurangzeb overthrew his brother Dara Shurko, a learned, humane, and peace-loving prince. But Dara was no leader. He lost not because he was kind, but because he was not cruel enough. In a crumbling empire, kindness can kill millions for weakness. Aurangzeb won because he understood this. And for that, he was hated. But the hatred did not end with the throne. It extended to religion. He was accused of destroying thousands of Hindu temples, imposing jizya taxes on non-Muslims, killing Sikh gurus, and banning music at court. But why, 300 years later, do millions of people still speak his name with anger? The answer may lie not in history, but in the present. India today is not only the land of Buddha and Gandhi, but also a place where politics is looking for enemies to unite the people. And there is no more effective enemy than a Muslim emperor who killed thousands of Hindus. Such an enemy cannot argue, cannot correct, cannot defend himself. Aurangzeb has become the ideal symbol of collective fear, the fear of a period of Muslim invasion, even though that period has passed for hundreds of years. And the irony is that a man who once ruled over 150 million people is now facing the threat of his tomb being destroyed by people who have never even read his handwritten letters. A king who refused to build a grand mausoleum because he did not want to waste the treasury, now seen as a symbol of Islamic luxury. A warrior who lived an ascetic life, never allowing his children to indulge in pleasure, is accused of every crime of luxury history can cram. This is no longer the story of an emperor. It is the story of a ghost kept alive not by memory, but by political choice. And that makes Aurangzeb more dangerous than ever. Not because he can kill anyone anymore, but because his name can anger millions of people who have no idea who he really is. And that's how a dead man still rules. It is often said that Aurangzeb was a fanatic, a Muslim so devout that he would burn down other religions to impose his beliefs. But if it was all just bigotry, why did he keep the Meenakshi temple, one of the holiest Hindu shrines in the south? Why not raise it all, as he is often accused of? Or the real question is, who wants us to believe that he raised it all? The history of religion in the Indian subcontinent has never been a symphony of peace. Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim dynasties all have taken turns occupying, destroying, building, and destroying again. But when Aurangzeb's turn came, people no longer remember the mosques that had been destroyed before or the Buddha statues that had been smashed under Hindu kingdoms. They remembered him as if he were the first and the last. Why? Because he didn't do it for faith. He did it for power. Aurangzeb was not a theologian. He was a politician. Religion, for him, was not a destination. It was a tool. He used Islamic law to legitimize his rule. He used bans on music, bans on alcohol, and closings of palaces to project an image of a chaste ruler in a court once filled with luxury and conflict. He needed distinction, and Orthodox Islam provided it. People were angry because he introduced the jizya, a special tax on non-Muslims. But it was not his idea. The caliphate had had it since the 7th century. Aurangzeb had simply reintroduced it, after previous emperors, including his grandfather Akbar, had abolished it to curry favor with his Hindu subjects. Aurangzeb did the opposite. He sought not to be loved, but to be feared. In a country riven by ethnic and financial strife, he chose the cheapest weapon: divide and rule. But religion was not the only place where he sowed blood. In 1675, he ordered the execution of Guru Tegh Bahadur, the 9th Sikh leader. He was beheaded at Chandni Chowk, in the middle of Delhi's main square. an event that has shaken the Sikh world to this day. People call it a testament to his brutality. But no one asks, why had Aurangzeb not touched the Sikh gurus decades earlier? It was only when the Sikhs began to form a political and militarized force, challenging Mughal control, that the sword was drawn. Not faith, but territory. It's not hate, it's control. He killed people like people drive stakes into a map. Each time he killed, he declared, "This is the boundary. If you cross it, there will be blood." But in doing so, he killed faith. By using religion to rule, he made every action, right or wrong, appear fanatical. People no longer saw him as a political emperor, but as a symbol of religious tyranny. Worse, that shadow obscured all other aspects of him. A king who lived a frugal life, did not build a mausoleum, did not love luxury. A warrior who fought for more than 50 years. An emperor who was not killed by his enemies, but died of old age, on horseback, in the middle of the desert. But no one remembers any of that. Only blood remains, and faith, abused to the point of no longer recognizing itself. Aurangzeb was hated because he killed Dara Shurko, his beloved brother, intellectual, progressive, a symbol of tolerance. But if a man is considered a devil just because he killed his brother, then the history of this empire is full of devils. Because behind every throne, there are always the bones and blood of his own flesh and blood. Dara Shurko was more than just the elder brother. He was the heir apparent, beloved by his father, supported by the Hindu elite. He was a bridge between Islam and Hinduism, a translator of the Upanishads into Persian, a dreamer of a multi-religious empire. But Dara did not understand the only language that kept the Mughal Empire intact, the language of blood. Aurangzeb understood that better than anyone. When Shah Jahan, the legendary builder of the Taj Mahal, fell ill, his 3 sons drew their swords. Dara was unprepared. He still believed in loyalty, in legitimacy, in learning. Meanwhile, Aurangzeb, from the south, where he held the Deccan, moved like a ghost, striking straight at the heart of the empire. Relentlessly, he doesn't need to be loved. He needs to win. The civil war between the 4 brothers destroyed all belief in royal kinship. Shuja, another brother, was defeated, fled to Arakan, and died in exile. Murad, the 3rd brother, had allied with Aurangzeb, but was himself betrayed, imprisoned, and executed for murdering an official. And Dara, who was seen as the last hope, was bound, paraded through the streets, and beheaded. Aurangzeb's hand did not tremble. People call him inhuman. But think about it. Has there ever been a beloved emperor in history who never betrayed his own people? Or is Dara just so beautiful in our imaginations that we need a monster to match? The truth is that Dara lost not because he was unworthy, but because he was not willing to kill. In an empire like the Mughals, where rebellions, intrigues, and treachery were a constant occurrence, kindness was a fatal flaw. Aurangzeb made no such mistake. He chose blood before blood chose him. After seizing power, he locked his father in the Agra fort. Shah Jahan spent the last 8 years of his life in a cell, looking out a small window at the Taj Mahal, the tomb of his beloved wife. It was a cinematic tragedy, but was Aurangzeb truly unfilial? Or was it simply the final cruelty of a man who understood that power cannot be shared? Not even with the woman who gave birth to him. It's something no one wants to admit, because it hurts feelings, blurs the lines between right and wrong, between morality and survival. Aurangzeb did not hide it. He did not play the saint. He did not pretend to be humane. He built a throne out of the same things others tried to hide: lies, betrayals, purges. But that is the naked truth of every empire that has ever existed. Only difference: he did not rewrite the story to make himself look better. And that is what makes him a distorted mirror. When we look into it, we don't just see him. We see the shadow of the emperors we once worshipped, who also killed fathers, brothers, betrayed their own blood, except they knew how to put on lipstick. Aurangzeb did not sugarcoat it. He left it to history to decide. And perhaps that is why history has not forgiven him. There is an image that always appears in the curses of Aurangzeb: a torch burning in the middle of the night, illuminating the ruins of the Kashi Vishwanath temple. India's holiest Shiva temple, which was demolished and replaced by a mosque. For many Hindus, it is clear evidence that he was a destroyer of gods, a destroyer of memories, a hater of indigenous culture. But what if that is only part of the story? History is not written in stone. It is written by the victors and rewritten by the losers when they return to power. For centuries, Hindu kings have destroyed temples, smashed statues, and obliterated the ruins of their opponents to proclaim their superiority. It was not a religious act. It was a symbol of victory. Aurangzeb was no exception. When he destroyed the Kashi Vishwanath temple, he did not write, "I hate Shiva." Instead, he built the Jayanvapi Mosque, a political statement. The land had changed hands. Religion was just a facade. Inside was a cold game of power. The paradox is that people are not angry when a Hindu temple disappears. They are angry because it is being replaced by someone else's symbol. No one is angry because the rock is falling. They are angry because the rock is not in their hands. In the 21st century, those stones have not yet been laid to rest. In Varanasi, crowds gather in front of the Jayanvapi Mosque, not to pray, but to seek evidence that beneath the mosque lie the remains of the holiest Hindu temple. They are not looking for history. They are looking for legitimacy to demolish it. And Aurangzeb, once again, was dragged out of the grave. But the bigger question is destroying a temple a permanent crime? Or is it a political tradition in a land that has always been ruled by symbols? Ashoka destroyed ancient idols to erect Buddhist pillars. Rajendra Chola burned temples when he invaded Sri Lanka. And even other Muslims before Aurangzeb, such as Mahmud of Ghazni, destroyed hundreds of Hindu temples, taking their treasures as war booty. But why don't we call them cultural enemies? Because they don't live long enough in modern political memory. Aurangzeb was different. His name was still useful, so people kept it. In India today, a 17th century temple being demolished can set a modern city ablaze. Not because of religious conviction, but because each brick is now evidence of a threatened identity. People don't want the temple back. They want to reclaim the sense that they were once its undisputed owner. Aurangzeb, even in death, remains an unwilling witness to that struggle. And every time the mosque named after him is mentioned, the modern battle lines are redrawn. But if we look closer, what he did was not so different from what every ruler who has ever lived has done. He used architecture to assert his power. He used bricks and stones to erase old memories. And he built new memories that serve the throne. It's not the destruction of religion. It's the industry of power. But how long can that industry survive? When the very temples, churches, and monuments, once built to honor them, are now used as fuel for new wars. Perhaps at this moment, Aurangzeb is not the one fanning that flame. It is us, the ones who need an enemy to easily name. In the windless deserts of Maharashtra, where there is no white marble or ornate pillars, Aurangzeb's tomb stands alone like a forgotten comma in the endless text of history. A small earthen tomb without a dome or walls, simple enough to match his own prayer. Do not build a tomb for me with a treasury. Let me lie there like a beggar. It was once thought a sign of humility. But 3 centuries later, when crowds gathered around the tomb, shouting to destroy it, its simplicity became an insult to the memory they wanted to destroy. For he had not left behind a palace they could easily destroy. Just a handful of dirt. And even a handful of dirt unsettled millions. Why? Because he is still there. Not in body, but in the unanswered question, if a man is hated by both history and politics, is his death ever enough? In May 2022, a far-right Indian MP declared, Aurangzeb's tomb should be dug up, demolished, erased. Immediately, social media was ablaze with controversy. Protests broke out everywhere. But strangely, very few people have actually been there. Very few can point to the mausoleum's location on a map. It's not in Delhi or Agra. It's not in any guidebooks. It's just a mound of earth. And that makes it all the more dangerous, because the invisible enemy is always more terrifying than a stone statue. Aurangzeb, in his death, left nothing but an unhealed wound to posterity. And that is exactly what the powers that be need today an unforgivable symbol. Other Mughal emperors, Akbar, Shah Jahan, left behind palaces, mausoleums, temples for people to look at and say, "This is glory." Aurangzeb did not. He left a void, and people are afraid of void. They want to fill it with a story, a name, a knife. But if we erase his grave, smash that mound, are we really erasing what he stood for? Or are we doing the opposite, turning him into a myth? A hated evil man will be forgotten, but a man feared, hunted even after death, will be remembered forever. For the act of destruction is the act of worship, even if it is worship through hatred. It is anger that fuels his fame, and it is the unquenchable indignation of the modern masses that is the reason why he continues to exist in the mind. The dead cannot argue, but his simple tomb still silently replied more calmly than any excuse, "I do not need a mausoleum, but you still need me." It was the final victory of a man who chose to remain silent, and the tragic defeat of those who refused to let him lie still. A bearded man, eyes wide, swings a sword at a burning Hindu temple. The camera pans slowly. The music swells. Blood splatters across a statue of Shiva. At his feet is the body of a child. He smiles, looks up, and his name is called out, Aurangzeb. Not history books. This is cinema. The movie Chavava, produced by Bollywood, did not simply tell a story. It wove in an image, not to understand history, but to manipulate emotions. In it, Aurangzeb was a barbarian, a symbol of darkness, the sworn enemy of every true Hindu. And the audience applauded not because of the art. They applauded because they were given someone to hate. Cinema, once a tool for enlightenment, has become a symbol factory of directed anger. And Aurangzeb, like a repackaged antique, is being sold on every cinema as a product of refined hatred. Why you? Because he is no longer alive to litigate, to argue. Because he has enough controversial past for the screenwriter to freely edit, set up scenes, and write dialogue. And because he represents the ideal evil, real enough for people to believe, vague enough for people to imagine. After each screening, there was no talk of acting or camera techniques. There was shouting of slogans, vandalism, and taking to the streets. Children who had never read history began to curse Aurangzeb's name. People who had never been to his tomb demanded to dig it up. And the political microphone holders laughed because at last they had created a new fever, the fever of hating history. No one asked, is the film accurate? Does it bend facts? Does it make up scenes from events that were never recorded? No, because who cares about the truth when outrage is more consumable? Bollywood is not just telling stories. It is redrawing the battle lines. It is redrawing the past to shape the present. And in this game, the characters are no longer characters. They are weapons. And the audience is no longer viewers. They are soldiers, armed with false emotions, guided by false images. On the silver screen, Aurangzeb became a monster. But on the streets, his shadow grew. Not because of him, but because of the very people who were trying to destroy him. A name that no longer appears in textbooks, but is present in political forums, protest slogans, and hyperbolic movie scenes. A name so hated that no one dares to read it without adding a curse. And that is what keeps him alive in the collective psyche, like a scar that cannot stop scratching. But it wasn't because he made it. It was because modern society couldn't stand the symbolic void. It needed a villain, clear, memorable, hateful. And no one fit the bill better than a dead man. History is not dead, but it never lives up to its truth. It is edited, cut, embellished, compressed until what remains is a shadow of what was once true. Aurangzeb is no exception. He is the perfect example of how a collective memory can be torn to shreds, stitched together with a red thread of hatred, and displayed as a warning to future generations. This is what happens if you are different. Aurangzeb was a scholar. He copied the Quran in his own handwriting. He wrote letters refusing requests to spend money on the treasury. He lived less lavishly than his father. He introduced anti-corruption laws and punished his own cronies for abusing their power. But you won't find any of that in his speeches today. These details don't fit the image of a bloodthirsty Muslim tyrant that the public has become accustomed to. So they were dropped. disappeared, as if they never existed. It's not the lies that are scary. It's the intentional omissions. Because if you only tell a partial truth, you don't need to lie to manipulate the crowd. You just need to withhold details that reinforce their anger and keep silent about things that might make them hesitate. They say he was a destroyer of culture, but they don't say he funded the restoration of the Hindu temple in Gauhati. They say he suppressed religion, but they don't mention that he allowed Hindu temples to be built in his court. They say he was a symbol of barbarism, but they never say he banned widow burning, a cruel ancient practice. For if we admit that Aurangzeb was more complex than we would like to believe, we will have to face a painful truth, that the enemy we have hated for 3 centuries was once human. And man is not perfect. Man is full of contradictions. Man can kill and save. Man can believe in religion and use religion as a tool. Man can be a villain in the eyes of one man and a just king in the eyes of another.